This is Modern. I'm Carmen Klemperens, joined by Mason Clark. We've got Patrick Sulivan on Is It Murktide against Hayden Iske on Boros Energy. Oh, Battle of the Titans here. This is one of the matchups on the weekend.
Yep. And I mean, listen, you come to Battle this weekend, there's two decks you know you're going to play against at least twice, most likely. That's Energy, that's Breach. And that's what Patrick here is playing round one. He's put himself to the test, and we get to see it on coverage. I can't wait.
Right, so he kicks things off with a Mishra's Bauble and doesn't like the top card of his deck, grabs a Steam Vents.
Yeah, and this is something you see players do a lot, is they'll Mishra's Bauble themselves in order to be like, hey, do I need this card, do I not? And in some matchups, you know, you would forego even playing Ragavan in order to get a card that you really need, right? Like if you're playing against a combo deck, you see your Spell Snare or something like that, you're going to want it here. But we're seeing Patrick just develop the Ragavan and pass the turn, and remember the Mishra's Bauble trigger type play.
And leading off on this Ragavan is something that I really like that Patrick gets the opportunity to do here, because he does get to play this sort of develop my punishing threat and then hopefully, proverbially, hold Hayden's head under with just interacting with each of his turns while accruing advantage with Ragavan. But Galv Blast puts a stop to that.
Yeah, it puts the Ragavan down. I was going to say, this is a moment, too, where the play draw matters a lot, where Patrick on the draw, you know, there might be a one-drop in play here for Hayden, and then it would be a position where it's a little awkward maybe you get a hit like this, and this gave Patrick a chance where, listen, if Hayden just kept a hand with Ocelot Pride, we might have bolted it down and got in with Ragavan, which would have been a huge swing.
And one of the things that this energy deck does is it accrues small bits of value over and over with. We see 2 energy being netted on Galvanic Discharge for Hayden to use later.
Yeah, and that's a big upside. I mean, your removal spell is sort of generating you like 2/3 of a card with Guide of Souls. It's going to come up as Preordain comes down.
Oh, couple threats on top for Patrick. This is something where they're both evasive, which I do like, but he might be digging for lands?
Yeah, I can't quite make out Patrick's hand here, but this is a spot where he's thinking on, and like we talked about, Murktide's probably a card that matters a lot in this matchup, just outsizes a lot of the removal, kills your opponent very quickly, something that, you know, he's clearly tanking on, so it might be like you're saying there where we really need a land or a specific type of card. I got to say, the irony's not lost on me. You know, for years, Patrick talked about cantrips, and now here I am, first round the booth at Star City Games, and I watch Patrick Sullivan cantrip.
All right, Flooded Strand, Steam Vents, Preordain. How's it going, buddy?
Yeah, I don't know, it's different Meet Your Heroes moment, as we just see on Misty Rainforest.
Oh, but he doesn't develop the Dragon's Rage Channeler. That's pretty loud if you're in the booth.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get to see exactly what it was. He potentially put it on bottom, but, you know, Patrick does have a lot of one-mana interaction in this deck, so including 1 Spell Snare. So that could be something here where this, you know, energy deck plays a ton of high-impact 2s, and he's really hoping to get him there. Yeah,
part of me is wondering if it might just be he has to hold up Spell Pierce if he has it, right? This is something where there are not many good targets for it, but this is, you know, developing an early Goblin Bombardment could be huge.
Yeah, and from Hayden's side, that wouldn't be the end of the world, too, right? This is something where you don't have a lot of good chances to get that card down if the game goes super late when you want to. We're going to see that Johnny developed instead, and then looks like Patrick is going to respond.
Is it developed?
Well,
is it developed?
It's not the one of Spell Snare. Bam! Deck building.
Got him!
Yes.
Look, we even see a 4-legged friend being snared in the art for that.
You do see it's not. We got to get the cat version of that. Get the
I know.
Team
We've
on
got
it.
the Watch Wolf one. Now we need to get the Ajani one.
That's right. Well, you know, the Secret Lair team, that one was on the house, as we are going to see the deck get shuffled there. But you're seeing, too, like, this is something that's a little hard to play against from Hayden's side. It's like, listen, the deck lists are open. I know Peace only has 1 Spell Snare, but I kind of got to play into this here, and gets got by Patrick, who very easily could have just been representing Lightning Bolt, right? Probably just bolts the Ajani is a very common timeline we're in. But instead, this is a huge get here for Patrick, as he does develop that Dragon Rage channel you talked about.
All right. Follows it up with another cantrip and Preordain. Triggers the DRC. Steam Vents to Yard. And then a Scry.
Yep. Seeing Lightning Bolt and Snapcaster Mage.
Ooh, the original throwback, you're calling it.
Yeah. And it looks like we just left him on top.
Oh, that's if you're sitting across from someone who tops with Preordain, you just feel cooked.
Yeah. I see, but my brain, I think card advantage, didn't scry bottom.
Oh, they didn't get their full value.
They didn't full value it. It was just perfect for them.
All right. Well, Spire Bluff Canal means that Patrick gets to keep having mana up on Hayden's turn. I think this is a play-draw dynamic that comes up a lot in red decks in the format.
Yeah, this is something you're just going to see happen a lot during this future match of, you know, I'm going to leave up some mana. I'm going to try and get you on some small interactions and then close the door out pretty quickly. And this DRC is dangerously close to Delirium, I believe. I think we are – oh, no, actually, sorry, we do have Delirium now because thanks to the Spell Snare. So, I mean, this is a 3/3, which also means, like, we can't get in there with the Ragavans, which we didn't talk too much about, but Hayden has 3 main deck Ragavans.
Right. There's almost this sort of emblem effect where you just get to have, okay, I have this card that's not exactly hidden in my hand, but it's 2 mana, poke you, maybe draw a card, definitely get a treasure.
Yeah, and Patrick has a lot of cards he'd be happy to draw. Speaking of drawing, Hayden's going to play Seasoned Pyromancer, discard 2, and draw some. We'll see how many tokens get made.
And this is where we're really going to see flying be so important for Patrick, where he might even be happy that Ragavan ended up eating a Galvanic Discharge because its utility drops off very quickly.
Yep, and it looks like Hayden got rid of some lands there, so no tokens, unfortunately, but did get to turn 2 lands into 2 new ones as the DRC attacks for 3.
And where does that fall on your value meter when they discard lands?
Through the roof. I'm in shambles. It's like, oh no, they cycled twice.
Oh, all right. Little draw go from the blue deck. Welcome to Modern.
How unlucky. No cards to play with Patrick.
I know. 4 mana and a green fetch land? What could this signal?
Nothing to do. As we are going to see Hayden size up the hand, got a bunch of new tools here, gets to think about what's going on, and like we mentioned, has to think about what's going on for Patrick. Now, we know Patrick got Snapcaster Mage in hand, which means that's first spell snare coming back.
Yes, right. This is the spot where knowing he has these high-impact one-ofs, like Subtlety, like Snapcaster Mage, you're almost priced into figuring out what you can actually afford to play around versus what you just have to jam and cross your fingers against.
Yep, and we're seeing Hayden try to figure that out right now. And, I think the Subtlety is a great call-out. This would be, a great turn for Patrick to be able to develop that if he has it in hand. Also of note, we mentioned Patrick has Snap, Spell Snare, and has a fetch land. Hasn't used the Surveil land in the deck yet. Patrick has 1, and that would be a great way to set up the next draw if we're a little low on the resources. It does look like Patrick's going to play Snapcaster Mage. My heart be still.
Yes, we've seen Hayden cast in a Johnny, cross his fingers. The one of Snapcaster giving a sort of second copy of the one of Spell Snare.
Yep, and then another Surveil happens in the DRC. I'm learning Patrick more of a dog person than a cat person.
Oh, that's true. He actually just got a dog recently.
Oh, how quaint.
Not that we text from time to time. We're it's fine.
First the WotC staff, now this.
I know. A Surveil from Hayden off of an Elegant Parlor. Looking for a Flage off something like that would be so choice.
Yeah, and the fact that it took a second to go to the graveyard, while I didn't see it, I know it wasn't Flage.
Right. You almost windmill that.
Yeah. Now, you talk about the value scale. Through the roof.
Off the charts.
Yeah,
Off
unbelievable.
The charts.
Yeah.
And this is interesting. Hayden just passes back, thinking maybe it was Static Prison versus Galvanic Discharge, or Threat versus Discharge.
Yeah, and I think this is also a great spot here where Hayden, does want to get Patrick dead and could even up the life totals, but the 2 damage matters more for Hayden losing it than gaining it, right? And so this is a spot where some players might be like, oh, I don't want to lose my Seasoned Pyro. Patrick's like, you're going to lose 2 life, bud. So doesn't want to lose that, so great play there as we do see the Surveil fetched up.
And this is one of those dynamics that we're going to see emerge in this sort of matchup because Hayden has a ton of inevitability in Flage. He's very interested in shrinking the battlefield.
Yep. Speaking of dynamics that come up a lot this weekend is the Surveil lands.
Yes, right. We're seeing a fetch and a Thundering Falls from Patrick Sulivan. Leave it on top. Value through the floor.
Through the floor down.
Oh, we've now seen the hand, the Bolt, and the Subtlety. The one-ofs out of Sullivan's deck, not bad.
Yeah, and I think this is telling, too. Patrick's clearly like, okay, I could develop my 4 mana. I know that's really important to do and get this big flying threat, but I want to use my Snapcaster Mage because I don't actually have much more interaction that's going to line up super well. So great moment there for Patrick. I think a lot of players would be like, 4 mana, spend 4 mana. Get him. Make him draw that card again. And then next turn I can snap Spell Snare. But instead it's trying to line it up a bit better and doesn't want the game to be about this Ajani and maybe get behind the 8 ball a little bit.
Right, and this is a spot where the Izzet Murktide deck is not very good at slamming the door shut unless the card Murktide Regent is involved. So when there's a lot of game left to be played, finding those micro-optimizations for selection is huge.
Speaking of optimizations, Dragon Rage Channel attacks for 3 because it must.
Can't mess that one up.
That's a rule.
That's one of my favorite parts of the card. It tells you what to do.
Hold your hand a little. It's
yeah,
like, hey, you know what, friend? You should attack. It's
right.
3.
We run through a field of daisies. Knock our opponent for 3 past the turn.
There's Arena of Glory for Hayden. That's going to be huge with the Flage if it ever gets drawn. Also just big sometimes with casting things like a Johnny or Ranger Captain of EOS, which we're seeing coming down here.
This is not a bad one. I think we generally see this one show up more with Mockingbird, but it looks like it might not show up at all as we see Patrick slam a Subtlety on the table.
Yeah, Ranger Captain, is great at the Mockingbird. You sort of chain it off, right? Value City, as we've been talking about here. But also, it's not that bad to go get an Ocelot Pride, Guide of Souls. I mean, I'd kill for a Guide of Souls right now, you know? So we are going to see that Facility developed, and looks like we maybe have something we can respond with here. The shields are down. Hayden knows that Patrick doesn't have any cards that he can cast from this point here, so.
It's possible that Hayden's considering if it goes on top or bottom. Top
sure.
it is.
Top it is. Okay, yeah, and, we'll run it back on the next turn. But Patrick is getting dangerously close to closing the door here. I mean, we have 6 in the air and a bolt in hand. And when against Patrick Sulivan, there's a bolt always hanging around somewhere.
All right, well, there's a Static Prison having Patrick's Clock in the air, going after Dragon's Rage Channeler. Is it scary to put Subtlety under it?
It's a little scary to put Subtlety under it.
It also does hurt Patrick's carded selection, right?
Yeah.
Not getting Surveils off all the spells is a really big deal.
Yeah. It also, I think, gives Patrick a chance to maybe not attack, which is kind of what you want. Can't go wrong on Dragon Rage, makes you attack. Subtlety doesn't.
That's true. There is a point where you go, okay, I really, really hope this Subtlety holds back to block. I'm kind of running out of life.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is something that comes up, and I actually love this attack from Patrick here. Even though the Season Pyro can now get value by, exiling itself from the graveyard for 5 mana, if Hayden did that, Patrick would be over the moon.
Right, that would be Hayden just committing basically his entire turn's worth of mana to creatures on the ground that don't do anything. And we see the main phase 1 paying energy on Static Prison. The Ranger Captain. The Counterspell. That's an alpha counterspell.
Giddy up.
Alpha counterspell. 2 bolts. 2 burn spells. Patrick Sulivan. Oh, that's...
Well, I mean, that's how he's going to win.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we told him it's not a burn deck. We set everyone up. It's not going to be a burn deck. Obviously, he wants like a burn deck. Yeah. Oh, can we get the Alpha Lightning Bolt? I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah,
I mean, look at that.
Those were 2 Alpha Bolts. But I think things could end up changing a lot in the post-sideboard games.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick, did a little bit of a deck tech with Nick Miller. We're going to see later in the weekend. I got to watch some of that. And he talked about he has plans for this matchup that are very thorough, and he's gone in depth on.
Right. This is something where, look, we can see both players. This is an open deck list event saying, right, this is what I've got access to. Hayden's got to have that stuff in front of mind as he adapts his own sideboarding. Do we think that there's anything that he can do to adapt to all of these pyroclasms that Patrick has?
Yeah, so I mean, Showdown the Scalds is a card that's going to be a little hard to get underneath the actual card counter spell, but that is something that can help fight through Wrath and fight through these value games. So I imagine we'll see something along that lines come in. We have some Ghost Vacuums, which can help turn the Dragon Rage channel off. I mean, you saw it must attack, and one of the classic plays is they attack, you get rid of the thing that gives delirium. Uh-oh, I'm on the ground. Kitty jumps in front. Big gameplay there. So I could see that easily being something. And then, you could make some argument for some other things like Deafening Silence, forcing 1 spell. I think that's not really where you want to play the game.
Yeah.
It's, you have some cards that you see these 4 Pyroclasms you want to take out, but one of the big advantages to Patrick's deck this weekend is people aren't super prepared for this style of Murktide. Blue-black Murktide's really the bigger gamer when it comes to the Murktide decks. And so there might be something, Hayden's like, okay, I've played Modern a lot. I'm used to playing against this deck, but not with this energy deck.
Right. We're seeing a lot of the sort of Psychic Frog, Haboran Oculus, very graveyard-reliant styles of Murktide. This is something that's able to just play more of a heads-up game. What do you think you're actually taking out if you're in Patrick's seat?
Yeah, so from Patrick's side, I think, we have these 4 Pyroclasms we want to bring in, and we're going to cut our 4 Ragavans. I got that one from him. He just said it on the mic, so I know that's going to be there. And then after that, I think there's a couple cards that you can easily want to bring in. Surgical Extraction is a big one. It's not something you typically bring in against a deck that looks like energy, but the card Flage is such a big part of the game, so catching that's huge. And sometimes, you surgical somebody after you subtlety them, and you get a little value on their draw step, right?
Sure.
So it's not like why you play the card, but things like that do come up.
Yeah.
Dismember is something I could easily imagine Patrick bringing in here. We had one in our main deck. I could see that coming in as well. And then depending on sort of, the sideboard cards here, you might see the 1 Force Negation come in as a way to sort of tap out and not be dead to Showdown the Scalds. It's something that you don't see a ton of, but sometimes you do want to protect your Murktides from cards like Static Prison and like these catch-up cards like Showdown. And with it only being 1 Force, it's a lot more reasonable, right? Often people would have a bunch of forces in their Blue-Black Frog deck and go down to 1 or 0. So I'm interested to see if Patrick wants to have the first one or not. And
back on Hayden's side, this Boros Energy deck just feels like a pile of good cards. What's the least good card?
That is always the hardest question in a deck like this. So, I think since it's open deck list, Ragavan is the thing I'd want to take out. If this was closed, my first thought would be I want my Ragavans just to maybe even block Patrick's, right? Or just play that low mana advantage game and really tax him for playing Counterspell. Teach him what year it is. Hey, it's 2025, man. But when I see my opponent has 4 Pyroclasms, Ragavan goes really down for me. And honestly, I could easily imagine Ocelot Pride going down a little bit too, or maybe Guide of Souls since you're going down on your ones as well. a little mixture there. Even though Guy can get you out of Pyroclasm range, you do need to play into Pyroclasm to do that a little bit.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it's really interesting where it feels like both players kind of have their own idea of how they want to play a more controlling game, but this isn't the only Modern Regional Championship that we're going to be covering in the next couple of weeks. We're also going to be in Charlotte. This is sort of a hometown regional championship for me.
Yeah, I mean, you grew up in North Carolina. We're going to be there March 7th through the 9th. You know, it's my birthday on the 9th. I'm very excited to get to cover this event. We'll be there, and I can't wait to see sort of how the metagame evolves from here. So if you want to come on out and play in that event or any of the side events, you can do that March 7th through the 9th in Charlotte.
Right. You can find more information over at starcitygames.com/SCGCon. We've got a bunch of these coming up over the next few months.
Yeah, I cannot wait. I'm going to try and make it out to some of them from not in the booth. Being in the booth even round one, I'm like, oh, I want to be playing this weekend.
I know, it's so tough. I'll be walking around the event hall and just go, oh, hey, no, I want to bird this match. And then I'll go, oh, God, I have a call time in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I didn't bring a deck for this weekend because I'm commentating. Next time I'm bringing a deck. I got to jam some games.
I
so
know. I brought a cube, but a cube takes so long. I just
yeah.
need to have something I can pull out of my backpack and sit down and shuffle up.
Well, luckily, I think I have most of Patrick's decks sleeved up from back in the MH2 metagame, so maybe I'll just bring that next time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But yeah, it looks like these players are getting ready here, finishing their shuffling up for game number 2 here. And I think one thing that we talked a little bit about that is going to be big here is this play draw dynamic. And Patrick winning game 1 here with being on the play means he's guaranteed at least the play for game 3, and that is so huge. Just getting a chance to develop and get to your counterspell mana without being so far behind when it comes to board presence matters a ton.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways that last game showcased how much mana dynamics really dictate the pace of these games. We saw Patrick able to get out ahead, develop first, and then knock Hayden on the back foot, who had, I would say that he drew the chunkier half of his deck, a lot of 2 and 3 mana cards and not a lot of 1 mana cards, and that made the difference. As Ragavan is how Hayden kicks things off this game.
Yeah, I mean, Ragavan's coming down on the play. This card can really take over the game, and Hayden being like, listen, I know you got these 4 Pyroclasms.
I like leaving it on the play. You don't have to commit it, right?
Yeah.
It does have that dash ability we were talking about game 1.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of it here. And, I mean, even if it gets answered, right, as long as it connects one time, that might be enough.
I mean, it's one of the ways that you can actually charge up a Guide of Souls without having to commit too hard into a Pyroclasm. So I see a lot of upside here, especially on the play.
Makes a ton of sense there. Maybe the Ocelot Prides are what left instead if we're trying to play around that, is we do just see a Spire Bluff and a passing of the turn.
Right, and now that Patrick went second, he doesn't really have the ability to just play out a Dragon's Rage Channeler and block. He needs to start answering what's on the table as Unholy Heat takes Ragavan out.
Yep. And, I mean, we saw a bit of Patrick's hand, a lot of preordains up in there as well. So we're going to be able to sculpt it. It's just a matter of giving us a little bit of time to sculpt the game plan we want to play.
And one of the hard things is that Ragavan actually can cast a lot of cards out of Patrick's deck in a useful way. In a lot of games, I think Hayden's going to play against Breach or something, and it's going to hit Imri. And
grinding station.
I don't know about this. Or hit the opponent's Imrikul out of Eldrazi and go, all right, well, I got a treasure, I suppose. But Patrick just has a lot of okay cards.
That's true. One of my goals is to Ragavan, hit an Imrikul the Promised End, and cast it. I haven't got there yet, but it's a goal.
Well, I think Hayden hit one of his personal goals in resolving an Ajani this game. That was something that he had a hard time with game 1, but now brings his brother with him.
Yep, yeah, a lore moment could occur in this game, but
don't say that. Lore, it's a canon event.
A canon event. Excuse me. Yes, if you don't know, Ajani Spark ignites, becoming a planeswalker when his brother dies, and that's why Ajani transforms when a cat dies. A little bit of flavor and storytelling. And Patrick loved my joke, as you could see him laughing here. They can't actually hear us there, but yeah, I mean, this is a moment where Pyroclasm would clean this up nicely, but also it's a 1-for-1. You know, like even though 2 cards are getting got, the amount of committed resources isn't that. And so Patrick might need to do this too, because a big thing that happens with these Ajanis is, well, the other player never taps out fully, and then you can never kill the Ajani because you kill the cat and then flip it in response. So this is sort of the one window Patrick might get the whole game to actually get rid of Ajani.
And I think that this really showcases the urgency behind answering all of these cards. I think Boros Energy does have a good bit of threat diversification, despite looking like it's just a pile of creatures. It's able to make Planeswalkers, Golem Bombardment's an enchantment that's hard to answer, and Patrick really just has to make sure that he's not giving Hayden an inch of room.
Yep. As we do see the Dragon Rage channels developed, Unholy Heat, Surveil, Patrick taking a look at it, seems a little stressed by it. I mean, the hand looks to just be preordained land, and a card I can't quite. I think another land.
Is that Dismember? Oh, it's Surgical Extraction.
Oh, it is.
It's the Surgical Extraction. And Murktide windmilled into the graveyard. Patrick really showing that he's valuing being reactive here.
Yeah, and I like this as well because it puts our DRC on Delirium if we cast the Preordain next turn. We have instant, we have land, we have creature now. And so, yeah, even though this is a card we've highlighted as something that you really want to close the game out quickly, Patrick wants to get this DRC going to do sort of a similar thing and knows that it's not going to have a chance to commit to the Murktide, or at least not a big one.
And there's even a world where I think Patrick could be putting Hayden to the test here and say, if you have a Flage, you might want to answer Dragon's Rage Channeler right now, as Hayden actually just dashes a Ragavan.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a moment where, yeah, you see Patrick sort of be like, yeah, I got to trade this off here. I can't let this connect.
That's really interesting. I think there's maybe, if it were a surgical, it might not be. I might have expected going after the one in the graveyard during the instep, but he really does not want to give Hayden a treasure if it looks like he's missing on land drops.
Yeah, I think it's also just kind of not what it's about in Patrick's mind, right?
Sure.
Like, I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And if Hayden was on a card, I could see that being the line.
Definitely.
But Patrick really weak to Flage right now. Doesn't have a lot of answers. And even though Flage is going to get its sort of upfront value, making sure we answer that is something I think is first and foremost on Patrick's mind.
I would just see players verifying life totals really quick. Always good to communicate.
Yep. Very easy just to not count the fetch, you know, when like your opponent's fetching and you're surveilling or whatever off your DRC and they're doing a response. This comes up. As it does look like Hayden did have the third land. I was curious if we were stuck on 2 and maybe even has a 1-drop to play.
A little bit of a fetch shock action. This is one of the most iconic things in all of Modern, right? There's nowhere else this comes up this much. Ocelot Pride on the instep without a life gain trigger.
Unfortunate, we'll just have to settle for our Ocelot Pride.
Listen, that's one of the crazy parts of this card is you can just pass.
Yeah.
It's supercharged if you immediately get it, but this is fine.
Yeah, I mean, Ocelot Pride, you know, fail rate 1-1, first strike, going to make some friends later. It's going to get in. We'll have to see how that goes. It looks like Patrick's draw for the turn was Mishra's Bauble. Taking a little look over there. Has to take a little read.
Oh!
That's Flage.
Oh!
Different art.
Yeah, that's the... You can see the smirk from Hayden. Sometimes you know you have one cool card in your deck and your opponent has to double check what it is and you just know.
Yeah, my Fib rates are my only card that are kind of nice in my black-white dog deck.
There's the surgical.
Oh.
Okay, not a surgical in hand.
That's maybe it was the Bauble?
I take it back.
Yeah, and it looks like we do see a preordained. It looks like surgical was put in the hand. It's going to be the draw there. So Flage covered.
I mean, if he doesn't have a counterspell, he doesn't need to have a way to check it. So this is one where he's probably not stoked to be leaving it on top, but you got to do what you got to do, man.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it's sort of what matters in these games, and this is going to be a developing turn either way. Patrick really wants to answer the Pride as he finds both Pride and Murktide Regent. Put him back on top.
Okay, yeah, no, there it is, very fast on top. That's exactly what he was looking for. Answer to Ocelot, Pride and the Bolt, and Threat all rolled up for next turn.
Yep. And draw from the Bauble there. And a lot of this, too, is Hayden might plan this next turn around Flage, right? Like, okay, this turn I played Flage, and maybe I even slow roll my Arena of Glory in hand. And then Patrick is going to go for that Flage if that is the case, which could be this huge catch-up turn we need because we just spent our last turn trying to sort of get back in this game.
Cool. Okay, so a serve with the cat token. Hayden kind of thinking about how he wants to navigate these next couple of turns. Count of the graveyard.
Yeah, I've got enough to Flage. And this, I mean, this is a huge turn, like we mentioned. Committing your turn to sort of lightning helixing your opponent here, it's not the end of the world, but it's not great.
It's not what you came here to do.
Yeah, and it's something where, yeah, it looks like Hayden's even going to just develop this Ocelot Pride first.
And pass back. This is super disciplined. Okay, so he didn't have a fourth land, which I think makes a lot of sense on the Flage front because it means that Patrick might say Ghost Vacuum or something like that.
Yeah, I like this a lot here. And get this down, and especially if you have maybe some sort of interaction in hand, right?
Yes.
Maybe like a Galvanic Discharge, just something that can maybe tag a DRC, clean it up, and then get in with your cats later.
And so frequently, whenever you have a threat like Ocelot Pride, it does feel like you're supposed to develop it earlier just to get as much value over the turns of the game as possible. As Murktide Regent hits the stack for Patrick, exiling a few cards. We'll learn how many of them are Ancients and Sorceries soon.
Yeah, on the Pride turn, too, you mentioned before, came down no life gain. Well, Flage gained 3.
Oh, my God. That's what it do.
Yeah, and then you know what cat do? Make cat.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so 4 instants and or sorceries getting exiled on this delve, it looks like. Patrick kind of making sure that the sizing is worth it.
Yeah, I think there's some amount to like, okay, what should 1 be in my graveyard? for potential stuff. And 2, maybe I want this to be a 6/6 and have more card types in case I draw, an Unholy Heat, but decides to just go for this 7/7 Murktide, big enough to survive 2 Galvanic Discharge.
Exactly. It also is a 2-turn clock.
Giddy up.
Hayden thinking a little bit. Tough spot at this point. The Izzet Murktide namesake. Not something you ever really want to face down. He's not just windmilling something like a static prison.
Yeah, I mean, this is a card that really takes over the games. And I mean, and it's part of why I think so many players are drawn to a deck like this is there's a lot of, interesting plays and agency you get when you're playing this sort of deck. But also the Murktide card's just so strong that sometimes like you're in a bad matchup and you just turn 3 this thing and it goes the distance when backed up with some counter spells, and it's really impressive.
Right, it's really nice. And here, with the 2 extra lands that Patrick has back, he is kind of representing Counterspell at the very least. And this turn's so bad if you just play a Flage and it gets Counterspelled and Surgical.
Yeah, I mean, it's awful. I mean,
even if it doesn't get Surgical, if you don't have the 4th land, it's not like it's doing much.
Even if it doesn't get Counterspelled, it's like, okay, I have 1 more turn. As we see Seasoned Pyromancers developed, I love this. It sort of looks like, Patrick's low on cards. Maybe he won't use a Counterspell on it, and then we get the Flage in the graveyard via the discard. As you see it and Ocelot Pride hit, that means we're going to get some 1/1s as well, and more looks at those lands.
Hayden really, really looking for an Arena of Glory at this point. That's one of the ways you can kind of shoot down a Murktide Regent almost.
Yeah, I mean, at least make it awkward to for it to get into combat and block. As we did find the 4th land, and we're going to see Patrick fetch here into turn. But I really like this play. I think low resources, it's something that maybe wants to get countered, but it kind of makes sure that you're going to get this Flage going, and it's your highest value play that doesn't look like it a lot of the time.
As we see an in-step Surveil land fetched up for Patrick.
I love this, by the way. I think players are so quick to turn 1, get my Surveil land, get into play, get my little scry. These get so much stronger when the game goes on. We're in a low-resource game now. Patrick knows I have the Flage covered. What am I looking for? Patrick looks at the top of his deck, sees a Bolt, knows that might be exactly what he's looking for, knows it might not be given on the context of his hand. Well, on turn 2 or turn 1, he doesn't have that same context here. So great play here from Patrick. And
no. Here we were going late in the game. It's so easy. Right as he gets a tough one. We can't quite see it. I'm stoked to see what is causing this level of agony.
I think it's Murktide number 2. That's because you see him looking at his graveyard, and it grows it by 1. And if he Surgicals, right? Okay, it's Counterspell.
Holy. I don't have.
That's a show.
Yeah, that was a. Ooh, flipped it so fast. Okay, the other card enhanced Dismember.
Okay.
We can see it.
All right, so that one, we know there's at least one in the main deck, so there was one in the sideboard. Maybe it came in. As we see, a land was one of the cards. And
just a pass. Very interesting. I mean, his life total is not very high here.
Yeah, it's not. And, I wonder if maybe we got tricked by that Phyrexian mana, and maybe there wasn't a Surgical. Obviously, if you read a Surgical, it'd be the draw step.
Maybe he bottomed it.
That's true. Yeah, maybe he did, and he just did some sleight of hand magic on us. We thought we were following him.
Okay.
Peace has been, he's doing the coverage commentary stuff more than us. He's trying to keep us on our toes, make sure.
Oh, he's definitely the type of guy who knows how he's holding his cards. Okay.
This would be the spot.
Hayden mills a card, draws for turn. Draw step Surgical. Okay, here it is.
All right.
Patrick down to 10.
Goblin Bombardment is the last card in hand for Hayden. It's a big one. And, I mean, this is a spot, too, where if Patrick had attacked with the Murktide and been like, all right, you're dead next turn, Patrick would be dead here if this Goblin Bombardment hit.
All right. And now Patrick also gets to see how Hayden sideboards.
That's true, and that is huge. Obviously that can change play and draw, but just knowing oh, you didn't bring this in, or oh, you left all of these in.
Oh, great. My opponent thinks Thraben Charm isn't good enough here. That's not something I need to play around. It's just so huge when you're playing at this level.
Yeah.
All right, here's the bombardment. It resolves.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
And I watched Patrick look over at his counterspell there. I wonder if he was digging for the Pyroclasm last turn in particular, and that's what the tough part became. As we do have the City's Blessing now. Assuming this resolves. I guess it technically could be on the stack, but it looks like it was a situation where it landed.
And all of a sudden, it's math time.
Yeah, and I mean, the math is not great. If you block the biggest thing here, you're going to take 5, take 1 from the creature you're blocking thrown. And so I believe Patrick would be at 1, which means this Flood Strand's turned off.
Yeah, it looks to me like Hayden's about to put the crunch in the numbers.
That was pretty good.
Was it?
Yeah, I would have called Hayden the Captain Crunch, but
it's pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah, we're seeing Patrick. I wonder if Patrick has a removal spell, and that's what's in the hand. It's like, oh, actually, sorry, we know one of them is Dismember.
It's Dismember, right?
So it might be a situation where I can kill this Pride now. I go to 6. I block, and I do believe you are dead if you do that. And so I think Patrick's just double-checking there's not a way like, okay, that's if I killed the Pride. What if I killed the Pyro instead? What if I killed this Cat token? Just sort of lining everything up here because, we are sort of all open information. Yeah, and Patrick just knows I can't win from here. He's going to pick it up. In a game that was looking dangerously close to turning the corner there for Patrick.
That was a sick game.
Yeah.
Like, it was really back and forth where the whole time we went, oh, God, okay, I think Patrick's turning the corner. Okay, I think Hayden's having a tough turn, but it looks like he's pulling ahead a bit, and it was very dynamic.
Yeah, and great play there from Hayden, too. I mean, I called out the season Pyro turn as being this sneaky flashy play. I think the turn prior, holding the just playing the Ocelot Pride, holding the Flage is a play that, I don't know if I have the guts to do in a lot of situations. It's like, well, I know, but they have Surgical, but I got to spend my 3 mana, right? And just getting that on board actually had pretty big implications for the rest of the game.
I think something that I've been really impressed by on Hayden's side this whole game is kind of picking his spots for what to play against. Game 1, he naturally struggled a little bit against some one-ofs, but the range of everything that he was able to sort of navigate around in Game 2 was huge.
Yeah, just great play there from Hayden. Very tight. I had a lot of respect for that. And just the way we navigated things and kind of putting Patrick to the counterspell test a lot of points there of like, hey, I'm going to make you sort of use this on something you don't want to maybe use it on. And if you don't, it's not going to be that bad for me.
And we're playing against a wide range of cards really is great for you. It's in Limited, which you can play at SCGCon Spotlight Series in Denver coming up in just a couple of months. It's going to be Tarkir Dragonstorm, and it's actually going to be the return of super competitive Limited.
Yeah, I mean, this is Limited at the highest level. It's going to be April 11th through the 13th in Denver with that new set like you just mentioned. What was its name? I was going to say, you've worked on it.
Tarkir Dragonstorm.
Tarkir Dragonstorm. I mean, those are all things I like. I like Tarkir. That was one of my favorite sets. I like dragons, so they've got some of those.
We talk about liking storms all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I love storms. I love the weather, and I love storming off, too. And so, I mean, these are all things I'm interested in. And I got to say also, Uggin's looking great in this graphic.
I can't spoil anything, of course. Mm-hmm. Uggin's so cool.
Ugin. Oh, wow. Ugin.
Look at the art. Look at that. That's the guy. That's the guy.
That's the dragon.
That's the No. It's the storm.
It's the spirit dragon.
It's the
Yeah, I was going to say careful water here. No, but I can't wait to see you all out there. I'm going to be at this event. It's going to be a really fun time. I mean, this is a hometown event for Patrick as well. Maybe we'll see Patrick once again. And Limited is so much fun to play. I can't wait to try this. I mean, I think a lot of people look back on the original Tarkir as one of the greatest Limited sets of all time. And, I mean, let's giddy up. Let's get in the
I know. It's one where even internally, the game design set lead for the back half of it was Adam Prozac. The first set that he worked on was Dragons of Tarkir. So he really wanted to make sure that it was a love letter to the original, and we're going to see a lot of that ripple through in a lot of the concepts and designs and so on.
Dang, all right. Well, I love Adam-led sets. I can't wait to play that one. But looks like Patrick's going to lead off with the Shock Steam events. Oh, looks like, sorry, maybe they were waiting for us on coverage. Shoes on the other foot now, Patrick.
Hold your horses.
Yep.
All right, he's thinking. Oh, it was Mulligan Resolution. Tap Steam Vents, Bobble Pass.
Yeah, very interesting here, clearly, Patrick does have a 1-drop, or at least wants to feign I don't have a 1-drop of any kind, right? Like, you would probably shock in order to leave in some interaction for a creature, but preserving life total and everything, as we see Ragavan comes back down.
I thought we were going to see trading shock tapped lands on turn 1, and just that would have been incredible.
It would have been nice. As it does look like Patrick's going to bobble. Hayden here, get a little bit of information.
Was that Ragavan number 2?
It was definitely a red thing. It might have been a Pyro, but it could have been a Ragavan.
Sure.
Patrick back into the tank.
And this can be some of the hardest part of playing this, or one of the hardest parts of playing this deck, is knowing when you're supposed to cantrip.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very powerful effect, but one that gets better the kind of more you know about things, and also the more things are ahead for you, right? When you're behind a little bit under the gun of this Ragavan, it could be a little scary to maybe, tap out for this instead of holding something else up.
All right, so he just has a Scalding Tarn and a passing of the turn. Hayden gets to untap with Ragavan, but if there's one on top, you don't want to kill it on your turn.
That's true. Yeah, and we're seeing Patrick's going to fetch in response and then just Unholy Heat down this Ragavan.
Have to do it in combat to get around that dash ability. So now Patrick knows if he draws the Surgical again, the Cabal Therapy mode is online.
That's true. Yeah, and I mean that's big. I mean, like it's very real. Like it came up, and had we done that last game, I mean, the way the game played out, it would have been pretty good. So now you want to obviously manage in each situation for its own merits, of course.
No, definitely, of course.
But also, maybe I should do it. Maybe I should run it back. Why shouldn't I?
Why shouldn't I?
That's right. As Patrick, 4 cards in graveyard, Delirium Head.
All right, so we see a fetch and that Ghost Vacuum we talked about between games 1 and 2, and Ragavan number 2 getting out under the Cabal Therapy mode.
Yep. Right. Ragavan down, Delirium gone. Everything's going bad quickly.
Yeah, this one's pretty tough. Ghost Vacuum is one of the cards that Patrick doesn't have a ton of real answers to in his deck. It looks like most of his artifact removal is just Meltdown, which is more going wide and so targeted. I don't think he could afford to bring it in here. I think this is going to be a real problem as this game progresses.
Agreed. Looks like it was land Unholy Heat Murktide here for this expressive iteration. And also you're seeing why players are moving away from Unlicensed Hearse, a card that was one of the premium sort of Ghost Vacuum slots just a year ago. This 1 mana nature of this card, even though it hits 1 less card, allowed for us to double spell, and that was huge here for Hayden.
An expressive iteration, putting the Unholy Heat face up. Just go ahead, tell Hayden what's up.
Yeah, and we're going to see that in Holy Heat. And, this is what Patrick wants to do, right? Like, we want to interact. We want to make sure the board's clear and then stick that Murktide and get to that combat step. That's just the missing piece from last game. We didn't get that chance to start swinging. And
he's being very, very loud about the fact that he wants to fill his graveyard at this point. He really needs to get a Murktide down sooner rather than later because the door on when he's going to be able to do that is going to close.
Yep. Overloading the graveyard is a great way to do that. And, we mentioned you want a big Murktide. With our opponent at 17, they're probably going to fetch again. If you get a 6/6 Murktide, that's a 3-turn clock. Right?
No, it's not bad.
So even though you probably have an 8/8, obviously, right? But it's going to be enough to get the door down here. So we're going to have to see if Patrick can get there. As I didn't see, we saw Unholy Heat was one of the expressive iterated cards. I'm not sure if the land was what Patrick kept, maybe needing it, or the Murktide. We'll see as the game develops.
Right. I think this is a game where Patrick's pretty firmly in the aggro seat.
Yep. We need to be the one closing the game out. Even though from Hayden's side you might feel like, oh, I've got to get stuff on the board and stick something. He keeps killing everything. Patrick knows if it goes long, I can't quite keep up with you unless I get running iterations and you get a little unlucky. Yeah,
I think last game we saw that Hayden has the ability to really turn the corner. I know Arena of Glory and Flage is kind of the thing that a lot of people expect, but the rate that Goblin Bombardment can just surprise your opponent with 6 damage out of nowhere is colossal.
I like this a lot from Hayden. Thraben Charm, exile the graveyard. Just the way Patrick plays, like you're saying, clearly trying to overlord the graveyard, trying to fight through this Ghost Vacuum.
Wow.
This is the backup mode on this card, but it's good.
I'm so impressed. That is so good. Oh, my God. You can tell Hayden has played a lot of Modern.
Yeah, really heads-up play there and someone who's getting what's happening here. Not a free one for Patrick round 1. He's having to earn it here as Bobble was taken off the expressive iteration.
It's a free one, right? It's on the house.
Yeah, you don't even have to use it now. You can wait.
Right. One of the really nice things about this Bobble in particular is it doesn't mean you have to use your expressive iterations on lands, which I know you hate having to do.
It's the fail mode. Listen, I want my EI to be spell.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Right. And this is really giving him the chance to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think this Ghost Vacuum, I cannot emphasize enough what a big problem this is going to be. I think Patrick won game 1 on the back of Snapcaster Mage and some flashy stuff with Dragon's Rage Channeler. And those are both things that Ghost Vacuum is just so good at stopping.
Yep. Good play here from Patrick. Make sure to wait till the Surveil's done. Pop it now so if we draw a counterspell, we'll have that up and live. You've seen Patrick sometimes do it on the other times just to sort of wait and have a little bit more information about what was coming down for fetching and things like that. But getting it here where counterspell is so big, the board's empty, we don't want Hayden to go Seasoned Pyromancer, discard 2 things, get some bodies, let alone if there's a Flash among them. Obviously, that would be disastrous. Ocelot Pride gets cast.
All right, are we going to see a way to gain life right now? No, just passing the turn. I really love that even in the world where Ocelot Pride isn't immediately getting value, it lets Hayden do 2 things. It let him stay in position, having mana available, and it also forces Patrick to commit mana to answer it.
It's very huge here. And something that could easily eat, a Pyroclasm by its own merit.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, exactly. In-step Surveil land from Patrick. Both players kind of get into the small game selection part of things.
All right, yeah, you're seeing Patrick immediately bend, and he's saying pass. And this is a spot where I like this from Hayden. Let me just get rid of this right now because you could play a Murktide. Looks like there's maybe a little communication error, but we got that taken care of.
I think he was like, I'll just exile a card. Oh, wait, I couldn't see the bauble behind your deck. I want to go after the artifact for delirium reasons.
Yeah.
Makes
Also,
sense.
maybe was pointing to it. Patrick thought it was pointing to a land. Who cares? Who cares? But
I
good play
really
there.
appreciate at this level. There's sort of these players. It's a real respect the game thing. Where it's like, okay, yeah, no, that's obviously what you meant. That's cool. Let's just fix it and move on instead of it being a whole judge call.
Yeah, we saw the static prison in the first game too. Patrick reminded Hayden, right? He did it in the main phase. Very easily missed the trigger.
Yep.
But Patrick's like, it's clear, man. I know what you're trying to do. That's all good.
Ooh.
Oh, and you see, this is why you got to watch your opponent's eyes. Patrick looks over at your graveyard. I know Surgical's up top. I'm ready. Can't catch me. As Murktide goes to the bottom, Patrick knows it's going to be a little hard to develop that.
Right. It's one where you're not really in the business of casting 7-mana 3/3s.
Oh, well, at least the second one. Even though you typically do want to cast your second Murktide.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Patrick's probably played in an era where that was a deal.
Yeah. Yeah, Patrick just plays with these cards. He just tells us, he's like, dang, these are so much better than these 3/3s with downside I used to play with.
Have you seen this thing?
Yeah, it's incredible. I wish I had a better Patrick impression. I don't have a good Patrick.
Listen, we can work on it later, but right now, Patrick's working on a Murktide Regent for 3-mana impression. That's a relief if you're in his seat.
Yeah, I mean, getting this 5/5 down is big. And, if Hayden ever fetches again, it turns into a 3-turn clock, and we have this pressure. And also, we saw with Bolts, this is going to end the game very quickly.
Oh, my God. Okay, and land number 5 being fetched very fast from Hayden. I don't see a Seasoned Pyromancer. It's just an Elegant Parlor. What if? What if?
I mean, if we bend the Flash here and bring it back with Arena of Glory, that's going to be all she wrote. It would not shock me if Patrick Sulivan concedes.
I am literally...
Please.
I am tensing up in my seat. You can see the laugh.
See, if I'm Hayden, I tank, Flash.
Listen, Patrick, I got a lot of love for you, buddy. God, that would be so sick.
All right, I'll say this. If we are doing it for the flair of tanking on the Flash, it's a little too long now.
No, it's not.
It's too long.
No, it's not.
It's too long.
Okay, he left it on top.
All right,
he left it on top. God, I was so ready.
I'll tell you this, though. We do have Showdown the Scald mana. If that came in, this would be a great spot to develop. But we talked about it in sideboarding. They developed the Murktide. Maybe you develop the Showdown. Try and find that Static Prison. Try and find that Galv Discharge. Sort of take over the game. This is Hayden's probably one last chance to cleanly get it down if it's in hand. Now, I don't know what's in Hayden's hand, but...
Oh, just a pass of the turn with 4 mana up. I'm looking over the deck list. I think this is just... The path looks like it might be clear for Murktide Regent.
Yeah, one thing we haven't talked about is Ghost Vacuum does have an activated ability. But if you can get rid of it for 6 mana, you get 1/1 ghost versions of the creatures with have flying. So that is a way to chump block this Murktide for a couple turns. So we might see Hayden actually go after my own Ragavan, go after my own Ocelot Pride type cards in the graveyard, and just pop that and buy us 1 or 2 turns.
I mean... That's pretty nice, especially whenever they help you with the City's Blessing. They're good with Goblin Bombardment. There's a lot of ways for Hayden to use that.
Yeah, and they still have their text. It's still Ragavan, right? So if Patrick attacks, you just be like, all right, block with the Pride one, gain a life, attack with the Ragavan one, boom.
Okay. Well, all right. Murktide gets in while the getting's good on Patrick's side. Hayden down to 10, I believe.
And you're also seeing one of the things that happens when you bring in a lot of cards to fight over these graveyards with these decks that need them but don't need them, if that makes sense. You use cards like Ghost Vacuum, like Thraben Charm, that have other modes that can't come up, but it just put Hayden down some cards. And these EIs from Patrick in the mid game here are really paying off now as we have a chance to sort of still have a bunch of cards in hand, a bunch of things to do.
Okay, and we see Hayden building up some energy with Galvanic Discharge on this Dragon's Rage Channeler, Surveil triggers on the stack from a Mishra's Bauble, but Hayden's going to net that couple energy.
Yeah, and I think Hayden might be going Discharge into... Okay, I thought there was a second there where Hayden was lining up another Discharge.
Patrick driving home that this Bauble's on the stack. It's targeting Hayden, looks at a card. Liked what he left on top with the Surveil. Pyroclasm. Okay, this is a spot where Patrick knows what he's going to draw, and he just wants to use his mana while he can.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe it's like a Murktide on top, and that's like, hey, I'm trying to overload this Ghost Vacuum, play this land, and just guarantee that like I try to get like an X's 1 on my extra Murktide, because other cards exiled will grow the Murktide that's in play. So
and look at this from Hayden. He targeted his own Ocelot Pride with Ghost Vacuum, just like you said.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hayden, very heads up, knows that that's a way that we can maybe get across the finish line here. DRC also in Patrick's graveyard. That's another thing we can put underneath here and keep us off Delirium. So pretty big plays coming out here. See Hayden sort of lining things up. Patrick knows that there's no discharges here from Hayden. He tapped up. Yeah, and I like this here, main phase 2. Just get rid of that. No chance for Delirium. Also no chance for the Murktide to come down and be more mana free-ish. You know what I mean?
And I almost wonder if Patrick left a Pyroclasm on top.
Yeah, that would make sense. Just like play the Pyro, be like, okay, dog,
yeah,
you know.
2 mana removal spell's fine.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, Expressive Iteration.
Sure.
Yeah, that's why would you only take the second card if you could take the second, third, and fourth card?
Okay, so look at this. Patrick actually has a Ragavan in that EI pile, changing up how he's playing in the tournament. You see this so often from players. We have plans that we adapt to how our opponent plays, and I love this from Patrick. He came in with a pretty clean boom cut, which you'll see in the deck tech later on this weekend with Nick Miller. But it's like, hey, things have changed. I'm on the play, the way my opponent played. I'm going to bring in another Ragavan.
And something that sticks out to me is that despite hitting a lot of lands, those Expressive Iterations mean that Patrick does just have a ton of gas going into the late game.
Totally. And I mean, and this is one of those things where, you know, if we were talking about this a year and a half ago, players would be like, yeah, obviously EI is good. Yeah, like it's the best card advantage card in Modern. Yeah. But since the release of the One Ring, a lot has changed in Modern, and EI is a good card, but not sort of the end-all, be-all. It used to be, you know, if my opponent top deck an EI, I'd be like, oh, no, how do I ever catch up if they don't hit, like, triple land?
Right, this format has become so much more about these incremental advantages rather than about a 4-mana draw 10.
Yep. Unless it's the One Ring. Then I'm all about 4-mana draw 10s.
Well, no, not anymore. We, you know, aside from the unpleasantness, that's something that isn't going to be legal anymore in Modern. Okay, so there's a fetch for a basic island from Patrick. Maybe growing another Murktide region?
Maybe another Expressive Iteration? Oh, it is a Pyro.
Trigger on the Dragon's Rage Channeler with the Ghost Vacuum tapped.
Yeah, the Ghost Vacuum's down.
Oh!
But I don't. Do we have? Oh, we do have Delirium.
Yes.
Okay, with the land. Nice.
Oh my!
That's huge.
Come on.
Yeah, and just double checking. Yeah, we have Delirium here.
Oh
no. So we don't, because
they're all sorceries.
They're all sorceries.
They're all sorceries. You're
okay.
totally correct.
Okay. I still got it. Dash Ragavan, though, that's who still has it as an attack for 7.
Okay, and that's huge. Hayden's all of a sudden in bolt range.
And you know what Patrick loves?
Oh, yeah.
Now, Patrick, no nonsense, would have bolted already. But a Johnny, now that's some nonsense Patrick might get into.
Oh, no. This is one where, depending on how it's worded, if it's worded like Origins Walkers, very much not something you want to cast, because if the cat token dies, Hayden would get the Planeswalker back.
That is how it works. You know, I thought we might see it just because, right? Like, we kill the Johnny, well, then Murktide's in play. But it looks like Patrick maybe has stuff he'd rather do with his mana. He's going to let that happen.
I mean, Hayden's under the gun. He has to do something right now immediately to stop this Murktide Regent from killing him.
And Hayden's taking a think.
Oh. Ghost Vacuum.
Yep, and now these are 1/1 flying ghosts. The DRC might actually be a 3/3 because of Delirium.
I see instant creature, artifact, land. Yeah, I see 4.
All right, well, we got those. Not something Hayden's deck's really built to do, but can do.
Yeah, look, any port in a storm.
Yep, that's true.
Oh, they have flying counters.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm saying it might be a 3/3 back to normal.
Oh,
Snap.
Snapcaster through the ghost vacuum on the pyroclasm.
Yeah, but Hayden's 3/3 DRC matters so much there.
Oh my God.
Looks like there's going to be a slight pause in the match real quick here.
Okay.
We're going to double check on that but in a second here. But yeah, I mean, that was great
Oh
sort
my
of moment
God.
here. This little things come up, and this is why Magic is one of the best games of all time. Hayden never built his deck with DRC, Delirium in mind against the blue-red Murktide deck, and here he is in round 1 of the regional championship having to do it. I mean, this is so exciting.
The intricacy of playing all of these cards is not lost on me, right? There's something where there are so many cards on turn, 2? We were going, is Patrick even going to be able to use these?
Definitely. And that I think there might be something to the Murktide region supposed to get bigger. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but that should get a counter.
Oh. Okay, yeah, all right. So
Yep.
it looks like it's just a mistrigger. Ragavan gets developed. Patrick passes the turn back.
Yep.
And now Hayden's once again in a rough spot.
Yep. And you see Patrick didn't attack there, Carbon, of course, because 2 damage marked on the on the Murktide and then 3 from the DRC because of Delirium. Would have been a very easy spot to just lose the game, especially after making a little misstep there. You know, good headspace there from Patrick.
Okay, and it looks like we're just catching up on, we're talking with the judge for a second, catching up with the game. It's really easy to miss that stuff. Damage being marked is one of the things that you don't really physically represent in a lot of tabletop Magic like you would on Arena or Magic Online or something like that. So I think that was really impressive to remember that.
Yep. I mean, especially, too, we're talking about right now, it's very easy just to make a mistake and be like, whatever, I plan to attack with this thing for lethal, and then you do it still, right? Because I got to kill the DRC.
Your flow gets interrupted.
Yeah.
These are 2 players where it's round 1. They are locked in.
And they've had a long match. I mean, you can see in the corner, it's a minute left in the round. Now, there's a time extension here because we're having a judge ruling, so we're going to have a little bit more time when we're done here. But still, you know, this has been about 50 minutes of slobber knocking back and forth. It's crazy.
No, you're totally right, and that's something that comes up with a lot of grindy decks, especially whenever you're playing blue. Expressive Iteration, Snapcaster Mage. Patrick's got a long day ahead of him, and he needs to be playing at this level.
Yep. I mean, especially, too, I mean, let's talk. We've been talking about it, right? Is it Murktide? It's not a deck that's super popular here this weekend. Patrick is sort of saying, hey, I'm playing these cards because I think I can play them well, and I'm comfortable with them. I'm used to them. I think it's maybe a little underappreciated, too, so.
And I think it's so interesting how well Hayden has navigated in the face of unknown information. In a lot of cases, we've seen him more or less just saying, okay, I think this is what sort of most of your cards do. It might be most of your cards that I think you could have here that make sense are removal spells. So I'm going to really respect Pyroclasm, for example. We've seen him only develop 1, maybe 2 threats at a time in the post-board games. And it's paid off in a big way. These Pyroclasms from Patrick have not been the most impactful.
Yeah. And I think it's been really good on Hayden's part to make sure they haven't been, right? Hayden has sort of played the game in such a way where Pyroclasm could have been backbreaking in a lot of spots, right? But has just not developed multiple threats. It's just been like, here's one, is that good enough for you? Here's one, is that good enough for you? And just they haven't been as backbreaking as they might have been in maybe a closed deckless environment.
Yeah, it looks like Guide of Souls was the first thing that he reached for when sideboarding, and I really do like that sort of posturing where even outside of the games with Pyroclasm, which very obviously can punish something like the way that Guide of Souls tells you to play, it's not good whenever your resources are getting picked apart. It gives Patrick a lot of opportunity to just say, okay, sure, you have a Soul Warden variant. I'm going to pick off your next creature or 2, and you have gained 2 life. Congratulations.
Yeah, and especially looking at the way, too, that Hayden sideboarded and wants to play the games, having the higher impact solar threats definitely makes a lot of sense.
All right, and it looks like the players are picking their cards up with a counterspell on the table. I'm feeling like that might be Match Sullivan.
I mean, it's hard to know exactly, but Patrick did have lethal in play with a counterspell on the table. So, you know what? I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to give it to Patrick Sullivan. He won this round.
Yeah, that one was really tight. We see the players sideboarding at the table. That was such a sick game. What a way to kick off the regional championships, right?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't ask for a better round one. What a great time. I mean, all these little nuance mattered. It was huge.